Alright, this video is all about how to play walking bass lines and chords at the same time. It's a very cool technique that can really improve your rhythmic abilities, and it's something great that you can do behind a singer or with a saxophone player or another instrument, being able to play these cool walking bass lines, especially when you're playing a jazz gig or even just playing some blues or whatever. It can just give some cool variations to your playing to get you outside of just the normal strumming that you might do in a regular song. So let's dive into some of the techniques that I use here. I'm going to start off with just a minor chord and just kind of show you some ideas that I do based around getting these walking bass lines. So the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to separate our brain and our hands a little bit. We're going to try to focus on the low E and the A string basically are going to become our bass. They're going to become our upright bass, so to speak, and they're going to do most of the walking. Occasionally you might hit a note on the D string, but for the most part I'm usually hitting notes on the A and the E as my quote-unquote walking bass. And then the top four strings, D, G, B, and E, are basically my chordal or melodic instrument. So basically just grabbing little chords, little triads along the way, and so there you have it. That's kind of the concept. So again, like I said, I'm going to just start off with a simple minor chord. Before I dive in, I will preface this video by saying that you should probably have some knowledge of jazz and jazz chords and some kind of music theory if possible. Just knowing minor seventh chords, dominant seventh chords, major seventh chords, half diminished chords, even if you just know one voicing of all of them, that's fine. But you will have to know some of these chords in order to kind of follow along to this video. So, but if you don't know that stuff, maybe you'll get something out of it too. So anyway, I'm going to start off with a D minor seventh chord. So on my 5th fret, on the A string, just your standard root position D minor 7 chord. So root, 5th, flat 7th, 3rd. Alright, so what we can do to kind of free up some of our fingers, a lot of this is going to be how are we going to free up our fingers to create those walking bass lines. So what I do a lot of times is I remove my 5th and I just bar the entire 5th fret and grab my flat 3rd F on the B string, giving me a lovely D minor 11 chord. So there you have it. And this kind of frees up my ring and pinky finger to be able to do some movement. So one simple thing I might start off doing would be moving the note D while trying to hold this stacked 4th little chord. So I have G, C, and F, my little minor 11th triad, and then my root note, my bass note. So you might just start off like that. Just again, getting used to moving, holding this chord, and moving those notes at the same time. So once you've done that for a while, we're gonna add a little separation. So you might want to try to pluck the chord on the upbeats, on the beats that are not with the walking bass, because eventually we want to just make little stabs like a piano player would, kind of in the background, just going boop, 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 just kind of comping behind someone. That's kind of what I'm thinking about here. So. So in my right hand, if you see here, I'm grabbing my bass line. I'm just using my thumb on that A string. And then I'm plucking these 3 strings. It is pretty essential to not use a pick for this style. So, you could, if you're used to holding the pick and able to grab these 3 notes with your middle, ring, and pinky, but I would imagine that's kind of difficult, and this way is probably a little bit easier, just using your thumb and not using a pick at all. So that's typically how I do it on a gig. I might keep a pick in between my fingers and grab it when needed, but typically when doing this jazz walking bass style, I will never use a pick. So. All right, so we've got that. So, as we mentioned, we added a little separation. So now, once you've got the feeling of the separation, you want to try to make it a little more like like I said, a little piano stab there. So you might just want to go. And if you notice, my fingers are constantly kind of moving. So it does take a little bit of practice. You might want to just do that really slowly, you know. It's almost you have to think that this is a chord in a way. Right? We have that same stacked fourth triad up top. And then we're doing the same thing, but with F as our bass note, you know? All right, so there's a little bit of that. If you noticed in that last little bit of me playing, I started to add a little bit of a ghost note in the bass. So this is pretty essential for the feel, for that swing feel. Again, it's just steady eighth notes, but you're giving them each a different kind of velocity, so to speak. And that really helps kind of tie it all together. I'll play it kind of, you know, as slow as I can here, with swinging as swingy as I can. So. So there's just a little idea to get you started on a basic minor chord. So let me show you another couple things we could do here. Sometimes I will move this little triad just up a whole step, you know? It's kind of like when the piano player is playing those stacked fourths. That's what we're playing, you know? We're playing these stacked fourth voicings. So you can actually just kind of move nicely between those two chords, you know, and they're the same shape, so. So you might just want to try something like that. You can also start to expand the chord a little bit. Let's grab the top note. A, we're going to grab that string with our pinky here. All right, so there are some ideas for a minor chord on these four strings. So that's just on the A, D, G, and B, and we really only walked the bass on the A string. So now I'm going to show you how to play this in a different position. So let's move up to D minor on the 10th fret here. Right, so we're going to bar our entire 10th fret and get a D minor 7 chord. And we can do the same movement. Except we have a different triad up top now. We have basically, you know, we have the flat 7th, the flat 3rd, and our 5th, giving us a D minor 7. So when you're in different positions, you'll be able to grab some new things there, right? So that was me just kind of like exploring some of those notes around there with D minor. So. So let's see what I did there a little bit. So again, just starting off with that. grabbing that chord on the upbeats. Eventually I started to go into the next strings for some bass notes. You can grab that A, the fifth. And what I did was I started to go all the way up. I went. So what I did there, I'm just following the Dorian mode all the way down with, you know, when you hear the bass player go all the way up high on the neck, you know, that's what I'm envisioning as that's happening. So again, just following the mode all the way down and just holding on to my my minor third and my fifth for dear life, you know? And just grabbing an E flat at the end there. You know, you could also maybe hit your 5 chord there. Again, so these are all just ideas for one chord, just over a minor chord. So this might be like the 2 chord and a 2-5-1 chord progression. But just to get you started in doing that walking bass movement and being able to grab some easy chords. Let's move on to a new chord progression. Let's just try a 1-6-2-5, and we're going to do, we'll do this one in C major. So we got C major 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, and G 7th. So we're going to just do some walking bass stuff to start off. Let's not worry about the chords just yet. I just want to get you down with the theory side of walking the bass. So again, we had our 1, C, 6 is A, 2 is D, and 5 is G. So basically, the way that I approach a lot of this is with the half-step approach. It's basically what I call it. I don't know if there's a technical term for it. But we're basically going to approach whatever the upcoming note is from a half-step above or a half-step below it. I'm going to play C, and then in between C and A, I'm going to either hit a B flat or an A flat to land on A. Right? So that's just approaching the next note from a half step above whatever it is. So C, B flat, A, E flat, D, A flat, G. There I went a half step below back to C. So B to C. Let's dive into what I did there. So again, taking the same concept we did from the minor chord with D minor, and we're just playing that bass line and just grabbing those chords, those little triads. So for C major, just have a root position C major 7, a nice easy A minor 7, right? Probably all know that voicing. D minor 7, you could use that 11th voicing that I did, right? So it's probably a little easier. And just a G7, so I've got root, skipping the note on my A string, grabbing F, my flat 7th, major 3rd, B, and my 5th. So. Again, just grabbing those chords on the upbeats with these 3 fingers. So as you probably heard, I'm once again adding some of those ghost notes in there. So you might think like, oh, well, the note E isn't working great over like a G 7th chord or a D minor 7th. But I think that it happens so quickly you barely hear it, and it just adds that little bit of low end air that you need to give the illusion that you are, hitting one of those low notes, like the 5th or something. So that's what I'm doing in between C and A. So once you're comfortable with adding those ghost notes in there, again, as you heard in that last little bit, I started to vary up the rhythm. So don't feel the need to constantly go boom, 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 boom. In fact, when you vary up the rhythm, if you listen to jazz, right, you'll probably notice that a lot of times the bass player is doing, not always just straight ahead rhythms. They're throwing in some cool little breaks in there or some extra notes or whatever. So start to think about that when you're going between these chords. It doesn't always require you to walk the bass. With guitar, we have to give the illusion that we are two instruments. It's not like piano where we can, play walking bass with left hand and then comp chords with right hand. But with this method, we're able to sort of give that illusion because these things, remember, the audience, the listener, these things are happening very quickly for them, and it might seem like they're happening slowly for you, but indeed, when you're, if you listen back to a show or whatever and you hear it, you can kind of hear like, oh, that was actually not needed for me to walk that bass that whole time. I could have just strummed some chords or whatever. So start to think about that. Make it a little more musical. Don't just walk the whole time. It's not 100% necessary. Plus, it's really difficult. You're making your life a little harder, and it's not as musical as it could be. So just start to think about that. All right, let's go a little bit further on this 1-6-2-5 and start to add some substitutions. So again, we kind of had just 6 minor, 2 minor, and 5 is our 7th chord. So one thing I like to do is, obviously we can make the 6 a 7th chord, so a dominant 6th. We could do something like that, a little dominant 7 with the sharp 5, so root, flat 7th, 3rd, sharp 5th. So let me show you those little substitutions there. So C major 7, A7 sharp 5, D minor 9th, so I've got root, flat 3rd, flat 7th, and 9th. So 5th fret, 3rd fret on the D, 5th fret on the G, and 5th fret on the B string. And then for G, we substituted that G7 with a G 11th chord. So I've got root, flat 7th on the D string, 9th, and 11th. It's basically an F major triad, and then you put G in the bass, using your ring finger on G, pinky on F, middle finger on A, and first finger on C. Now let's try a couple more substitutions. For the 2 chord, let's do a half diminished chord. So. So right there, all we did was take that minor 7th chord, that minor 11th, and we add our A flat to that, giving us a nice half diminished. So. it's all about taking those, adding those little substitutions in, because once you get the walking bass thing down, you'll see that there's only, there's a finite amount of notes that are going to be available to you in whatever area of the neck you are in, because we only have these 2 strings and these couple frets to deal with. So being able to vary things up with little substitutions of chords can be extremely useful to make it sound a little fresh and stuff like that. So again, we just had a simple minor 7 flat 5 to replace our D minor 11. Another thing we can do is we can grab the tritone sub of our 5 chord. So instead of a G7, play a D flat 9. Let's try that. So C7, A minor 7. Let's do the minor 7 flat 5 here. So we'll do D half diminished, D flat 9. So one thing when you're starting to grab those, that D flat 9, if you saw, I was able to grab my 5th. Pretty easy movement right there. So on the D minor 7 flat 5, I also grabbed A flat, because that is the flat 5. All right, I'd like to do one last example, which is playing the song All the Things You Are. I will give you a chart in the PDF for this video, just so you can follow along, and I'll play it a little slowly at first, just to give you an idea of how to mix and match some of these things, and then I'll try to give a little breakdown of what I do while I play it. So I'll just start off. It starts off in the key of, it starts off on an F minor 7 chord, and goes through a bunch of 2-5-1s. It's a great practice song because there's just so many 2-5-1s in it, and you can swing, and you'll see what I'm talking about, where sometimes you'll swing the notes, sometimes you'll play them, maybe give them a halftime feel. It makes it all very musical to kind of vary these things up. So. So just to give you an idea there with the chord progression of All the Things You Are. So as you can see, I'm kind of trying to vary things up as much as I can. At one point, I didn't even play, I think I went up to this, just removing the bass altogether and just putting in some little. Alternately, you could do the opposite. You could get rid of all the chords and just play the walking bass for a little while. So it's good to kind of just vary these things up. And what you can do is kind of like what I showed you earlier in the video. Just take one chord and see what notes you can grab around it. What's easy to grab on this major 7th chord. A lot of times I'll just do that, just thinking about grabbing those 2 notes, the major 7th and the 3rd. and just, again, giving that illusion of a piano player, just boop, 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 hitting little chords here and there. And all the while trying to hit my walking bass line. So over that major chord, you know, I just played root, second, third. Could even go and grab something like that. There I was just going root, third, fifth. And again, I'm doing that little ghost note, even though I'm playing an A sometimes over A flat major 7. Right? You can barely tell that it's an A because it happens so fast, and I'm just giving it that illusion, kind of like a ghost note. You know, you kind of hear that A just a little bit. Sometimes I just hit the open string blatantly, but it still works, you know, because it's just adding that little bit of air in there that you need to get in between those changes. So there's a little breakdown to get you started on playing some walking bass lines and chords at the same time. Hopefully this was a decent video to get you on your journey there. So I will see you soon. Thanks for watching.